I was wondering if you can unpack, Dr. Tad, is what impact does it have in our life when we bury our trauma, and how does it emerge in different areas of our lives?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I love it when people, that's kind of like, what's the meaning of life? Um, Probably your question is, where doesn't it penetrate? I can't think of any area it wouldn't. I know I work with colleagues. Medicine is based, there's a lot of shame in medicine. And so medicine attracts a lot of trauma-based people because it helps you get through, at least in med schools in America, similar. When I went to school, it was based on yelling at you, kicking buckets, threatening to kick you out, unless you looked brilliant every day. And when you complained that you looked tired after 48 hours of no sleep, you just knew, you don't mention it. You would never complain about no sleep or tired or doubts about yourself. You didn't mention to a patient, I don't know what to do for you next. It just wouldn't be, that expert that could never be wrong. So shame affects where we work. I see it in people that can't admit they made a simple mistake and just, oh, oops, move on. I see it affects marriages. It can destroy a marriage when the people just out of their shame based. And I tell them, I've told husbands before, I said, look at your wife. What do you think would happen if you admitted you were wrong? And he said, well, I said, well, I said, go ahead, admit one thing. I said, did you see that look in her eyes? She really loves you. She's in tears right now, not because you were ever wrong, but because she thought this day would never happen. Because you're finally human with her. So when we have shame and trauma, it dehumanizes us. It takes our ability to be able to make mistakes and easily just change course. It affects how we raise our children, probably more than anything. And it causes severe isolation because shame leads to a secret life. We're only as sick as our secrets. And for so many of us, we carry these secrets through our lives. Yes, I'll say that again. We're only as sick as our secrets. So when people come in and say, oh, but if you just knew everything about me, I know you wouldn't like me. And I said, no, that's what made me like you more. When I see what you've overcome, I tell people all the time, I said, I don't have a great deal of respect for the firemen. I shouldn't say respect, but it doesn't, blow me away. When a fireman runs into a fire, because I treat a lot of firemen, that's what they love to do. It's exciting. They almost all have ADHD and it's stimulating. They run and they save the world and they feel amazing. Okay. I said, the fireman I have respect for is the fireman who got burned as a child severely over his body, tried to save his family, and has guilt and shame that he couldn't save everyone. And every time he runs into the fire, he still has incredible fear of fire, and yet he does it again. That's the one I have the great respect for. It's the respect for people who take on their fears. So when people come in and talk about incredible failures in their life, maybe they've had addictions, they've made poor choices, they've fallen into things, and typically those are from their trauma that never got to address. So what do? They medicate it away. And I tell them, I said, well, you just didn't have my meds. Okay, you used your own meds. Okay, mine aren't as addictive. Okay, or I'm not going to use an addictive med in you. So I find that there's just not a place it doesn't penetrate eventually.
That's so true. And I guess maybe you could explain a little bit more to us about the anger IQ and the anger IQ curve.
Oh, great. Yes, there's so many things to talk about, and I feel like every question you ask, I could give an hour lecture on. So I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, I'm going too long on these answers. And I apologize if you're wanting very short, distinct answers, but you asked such amazing things. There's so much to talk about. So the anger IQ curve is a thing I talk about a lot of times with children with ADHD, but it really applies to so many people. And it particularly applies to people from trauma. Remember, we talked about our amygdala and how that can lead to these responses that are reflexes. They just shoot out of us, okay? So what I'll find is the anger IQ curve is as our anger goes up, well, I'm sorry, I'm getting that a little too close, our IQ starts to drop, and I'm talking like 10, 20, 30 points. Case example is like, well, how much really? Okay, think of the smartest person when they get really angry, we can all get so angry we can't fulfill a complete sentence. Me, like right now. Okay, I'm not even angry. Yes, where we're just, I'm so mad. You just go. Okay. And we, and our children are looking at us, you're an idiot. What's with you, Mom? Okay. And I'm sure I've done that too many times. Okay. And proof that we're not all healed quickly. Yes, we're all working on ourselves. Okay, but it can, and I see this. You can see it very easily in children. You can see it through adults. We men are great at this one sometimes. Because we're not allowed to shut. We have to blow up. Is how we're taught to deal with our shame and anger. Women typically are socialized to shut everything down. Okay, and if not, we all know the words women are called if they get angry. Okay, so you can go two different ways, and it can get to that point where we have that shame and anger that will hit, and oftentimes when our shame is hit, our anger will boil. I think for many of us, we've seen that that situation where our boss, someone in the room gets shamed by the boss. So we're in a meeting of pastors, and someone feels shame, and they start reacting in a way that you're going, no, you need to stop, don't go there. Don't go, and they keep going and going, and before you know it, they're fired. And you're just, oh, why couldn't you let it? That person was completely wrong, but why couldn't you let it go and talk to them in private? Okay, well, that's that anger IQ curve. Their anger becomes so high that their ability, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, again, that area of the brain that helps us focus, concentrate, error detect, those higher functioning things, gets hijacked by the amygdala. And in most situations, when you go back in therapy, and I'll talk to I work with a surgeon who keeps blowing up and getting fired. I said, does that seem like, he goes, well, of course, in hindsight, it sounds terrible. Yes. I said, yeah, you know what? Your brain got hijacked. Yes. So that trauma center, you hear your dad, the way your dad used to speak to you when you were a kid and hit your mom, when that surgeon talked to you, who did that sound like? He goes, well, he sounded just like my dad. Yes, and you reacted with the same feelings, only now you can fight back. Before, you used to just go get hit so mom wouldn't take the beating, you'd take it instead. But now, and so you worked really hard to become the smartest doctor in the room, and you always are, but that still doesn't save you. You try to become, because now you're so powerful, everyone's scared of you, and they just fire you because they feel stupid around you, and they know you're going to expose them. So until we work on your trauma, you're not going to go anywhere in your career. You're just going to keep floundering, getting more and more frustrated. So it can really impact every area of our life in ways you would just not see. But it's interesting because in our country, trauma therapy has become such a big deal now. A lot of people are really seeking additional training in it. Because when you really get to know people and really start unpacking them and what's really driving things, when I talk to, I have children that are coming in, well, so often, what's driving them is, who's traumatizing them at school? What's happening at home? What did the neighbor kids do to him? Why did this really sweet kid suddenly start getting angry and acting out and being very disrespectful to parents or myself in the room? What's going on that he suddenly changed so much? So there's so much now unpacking of what's all back there, because it could really be affecting what's happening now. And for me now, I start looking for trauma a lot faster. And the last thing I do is ask them, were you ever physically or sexually abused? Because they'll just say no, probably, because they don't feel safe to bring it out. Because where they've been, it was not safe to talk about it. So, of course, they won't say that to me the first time. I don't see them as lying to me. I just asked a question that, of course, they can't answer right now.
All right. So it's a journey.
It's almost as if you asked your leader of your country, is this happening? Well, if it's classified information, of course he's going to say no, he can't comment on it, or he'll dodge it. Okay? Until they can really talk about it. And their brain has programmed, it is not safe, do not talk about it. Because for many of these families, their fear is the whole family will be destroyed if this secret comes out about mom or dad. And that may not be true, but it will be very radically changed for a while. To which then I say, so let me get this straight. So you're going to be the secret holder who will die with a secret, and you will die. And your family will suffer with this because of the damage you've done. Now, you don't necessarily have to declare it to the whole family, but you don't have to go around your family pretending it never happened anymore either. We can get freedom from this, and eventually you will probably be able to forgive these people, see them as the wounded, flawed people who were abused themselves, Almost 90% of the time that is. Abuse rarely happens, just pops up in one generation. Okay.
Yes.
But I tell them also, I said, you're going to become the leader of your family. When you go through your treatment and your therapy, it's always the first person out that finally tells the secret, the black sheep of the family, that is usually the healthiest person in the whole family. Because everything has been cast on them as, well, they become the problem, and then we don't focus on what the real problem is. Okay? And the hero child will lie and defend. They're the last person typically to go out because they're protecting the secret forever and ever and ever. Okay? Although it's interesting, sometimes when we cry, that hero child will fall on the sword and become the scapegoat because someone needs to be the scapegoat because it's the most powerful role in the family. And it will never go, it's a vacuum that will never go unfilled. Someone has to be it, or else the attention falls on, on who's really it in the family. Who was the abuser, who had the addiction, the problem in the family, the secret. So it's amazing sometimes where I'll talk to families where I have maybe a bipolar family. Well, not everyone has it, but someone in the family has. And for 3 generations, someone has committed suicide. To which I think, does anyone ever talk about that or look at that? Maybe we should screen a few people and maybe get some help. And, well, does anyone ever talk about the family gatherings? No. I said, well, guess what? We're going to go back. Don't ever mention that word, but go back home, next family reunion, and just start asking, real kind of subtle questions about, hey, whatever happened to this uncle and that uncle? And they come back and they go, oh my gosh, my family's eat up with this stuff. I go, yeah, and no one ever talked about it, but it's right there in plain sight. And so, what's that?
Your brain classifies it, as you said. It's classified.
Yes, but it's amazing. We all have blinders, and we get taught to have blinders in families, and I teach ourselves. And so we get really good at seeing what's right here, But we're terrible at seeing right here. And so a lot of times everyone wants me to, what's a book? I need a book. I need a book. Well, what I learned, because my parents were raised on books, and they were always reading some Christian self-help book. I mean, they have libraries of these books, that they want to give me and pass on. I said, Mom, that's great, but books do one thing really well, but there's one huge problem with books. And they said, what's that? What book do I need to read? Because they've read them all, And I said, this right here, you get really good, you'll see. But this blind spot right over here, you'll never see it until I pull it, and then you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it was there. And it happens every day in my office where someone comes in and they can't believe what's going on. They can't believe what's going on wrong. And then when I finally point out a few of those, I say, so, the classic example would be, I had a woman the other day comes in and says, I can't believe my husband's having an affair on me. I can't believe it. We've been married for 20 years. I thought he loved me. I can't believe it. And I'm going, well, that sounds really traumatic. And we talk about that. And I'm thinking, well, who was it? It was his secretary. Can you believe it? Of all the people. And I'm thinking, well, that would have been one of my top picks. But I'm thinking, behind in back of my brain. And he said, she was like family. We brought her on our vacations. We took her everywhere. I'm thinking, okay, I'm really thinking this now. We brought her. I used to take her shopping for clothes. I was buying. And finally I said, so did you hear what you're saying? All these things you're saying, and you didn't see any of this coming? She goes, oh my gosh, now that I hear me saying it, it was like right there. I go, yeah, we just took that blindfold off. You're a very smart woman. You're a professional. You're brilliant. But we can all have blinders. But I asked her, I said, did your dad have an affair on your mother? Well, yes, and he had multiple affairs, and I swore I'd never marry someone like that, and I made sure I didn't. And I went to marry someone. I said, you did everything right, didn't you? You worked as hard as you could. You did everything right, and here we are back to, if I just do everything right, I'm going to be okay. And maybe you're not, because there's other things going on, because you can't control other people, because you had blinders on, because my number one prediction would be, okay, is if we always marry the equal and opposite of our junk, right? Okay, so for every abuser, there's a woman looking to be abused. For every man who can't speak, there's a woman do all the talking for him. For every drunk, there's someone who'll clean up the vomit. We grow up with what we knew, and we pick the opposite. And who did she pick? She knew how to deal with a person who was a serial cheater on her mom, and she picked the exact same thing, just an upgraded version. And boy, if you talk about shame, did she have that for that decision? But I said, you were trained to pick this.
Yes.
Nobody sat down and say, hey, how are you going to change all this and do something different? How are we going to break that cycle that's been in your family?
Yes.
And so what therapy is really good at is breaking those cycles. How do you get control to actually make choices? Because she would think she had total control over who she picked. I would argue there was a lot of things that were unconsciously picking her spouse for her. The main point of that whole thing, though, was really learning to work through that shame, getting through that journey. It can take time, but it can be incredibly freeing. And I find that I tell people all the time, oh, yes, I remember where I was in that, is that had you found a truly healthy person, it would have never worked because you wouldn't have fit with them.